Good morning or afternoon, wherever you are. We are going to be going into Brain Pop today for a lesson on communities, since we are talking about places to live after you age out, or some different options for housing. So I'm going to share the screen and we're going into Brain Pop Junior, and we are going to look at rural, suburban, and urban. So I'm going to play this video first. And as always, I have to make sure that I have shared the sound. Goodness gracious. Okay, here we go.
Moby, you're making it worse. I know, I like making snowflakes too, but they're so messy. At least it isn't my job to sweep up every day. I mean, some kids have a lot of hard work to do. My pen pal Jin lives on a farm, and he wakes up at 5 in the morning to milk the cows. What kind of places do people live? My friend Emma helps shovel snow in front of her apartment in the city. I guess people's lives can be pretty different depending on where they live. Well, I know there are people who live in rural areas, like farms. And then there are families that live outside of a city, in suburban areas. And some people live in urban areas. But what is an urban area exactly? This is definitely a city. There are lots of buildings and restaurants and stores, all close together. People speak lots of different languages, and there's all kinds of different foods to try in urban areas. It's cool to experience so many cultures. Hey, save some for me. A lot of people work and live in the cities. More people live in New York City than any other city in the United States. There are over 8 million people who live here. There are buses and trains to help people get around in urban areas. My friend Emma takes the subway to school. Way cooler than the school bus, if you ask me. Well, I guess we have fun on the school bus, too. What are suburban areas like? Moby, we're in the burbs. The suburbs. Suburbia? Well, we're close by the city anyway. I guess some people live in the suburbs, but travel to the city to work. The suburbs have some of the same things cities have, like schools, banks, grocery stores. Everything is just a little more spread out. Then there's some places where things are really spread out. Entering Farmville. Population 1,300. What is a population? Well, I know the word popular has to do with things people like. Maybe the word population has to do with people. Like 1,300 people live here. That's a much smaller population than New York City. This must be a rural area. But what's a rural area really like? There sure are plenty of big open spaces. Farmers use all the rural space to grow crops or raise livestock. Farming is hard work. Okay, you've done enough damage here. Time to head back to our community. At least this isn't as hard as farm work. Thanks, Moby.
So what did you think of that video, and what did you think about the different places to live? Some of you might live in a rural community right now that is more farmland. You might live on the outskirts of Sioux Falls or in smaller towns. Sioux Falls is more like a suburb, except we're not really attached to a larger city, but I like to think of Sioux Falls more as a suburb since I lived in Chicago. Chicago is more urban. New York City is super populated, that is urban. So these bigger cities are urban. Sioux Falls is more, some people might think it's more urban. Personally, I think it is more like a suburb. And then the smaller towns and farmlands are rural communities. So what would you like to live in?
Start.
We're going to take a quiz and see how much you remembered about the rural, that's a tricky word to say. Can you say it with me? Rural, suburban, and urban areas.
Start.
Which of these sentences shared an opinion? I shared my opinion. So remember, an opinion is something that is not a fact. It is just something that somebody might think. Other people might not agree, and that makes it an opinion. So the first one is living in the city is more fun than living on a farm. Just because somebody else might think that, or I might think that, doesn't mean you might think that. So that is my opinion. Over 3 million people live in Los Angeles, California. It doesn't matter if we agree on that or not, that is a fact. So that means it's not an opinion. I might think that, and you might not think that, or you might think that, and I might disagree, but that's what the fact is, and the statement is true, that over 3 million people live in that city. So that's not how somebody feels about a situation. That is the actual truth, which means it is not an opinion. Buildings in rural areas are spread out. Again, that's not an opinion because it's true. If you would go to a rural area, the buildings are spread out. And if you would go to an urban area, they make the most of their space because there's not much space and they have to pack a lot into it. So, and D, many people work in the city. Well, we talked about how Los Angeles is a city and there's over 3 million people that live there. A lot of people work there as well. They're not giving any feelings about this. So that is not an opinion, it's also a fact. So we're gonna go with A. Living in the city is more fun.
Living in the city is more fun than living on a farm.
Living on a farm. We got that one correct. That is shares an opinion. What might happen if a city becomes too crowded? Would everyone become farmers? Let's see. We need more space for farming. We need more space. So if it becomes too crowded, I don't think that would be the solution. Most people would move into houseboats. Well, there might not be a body of water nearby, so that one's probably not too likely to happen. It would be easy to find an apartment. If a city becomes too crowded, that means housing is probably limited. So it won't be that easy to find a place. Some people might move to the suburbs. I think there is our answer. If the city is too crowded, they might have to go to the suburbs, which is close to a city, but not as crowded, and you have more space, and it's less populated.
Some people might move to the suburbs.
There we go. Number 3, Chris lives in a tall apartment building. Would you like to live in a tall apartment building? I live in an apartment building right now that has about 6 floors. And sometimes I take the elevator and sometimes I take the stairs. But I have to make sure that when I'm bringing my groceries in, I'm not bringing too many at a time. So there's certain things, there's certain positives. I can see the cities, the skyline. And then there's some negatives that there's a lot of stairs and it takes a while for me to get home. But so Chris lives in a tall apartment building. He rides the subway to work. Where do you think he lives? So he's not taking a car, he's not taking a horse. He's not walking. Do you think he lives in a city, a suburb, a forest, or on a farm? Let's see, if the apartment building is tall, it's probably because it's a cramped area. Let's try
In a city.
a city. Next, what is true about rural areas? So remember, it's not an opinion, it is a fact. Rural areas do not have schools. Let's think about a rural area like Salem. Let's think about Salem, South Dakota. It's rural, there's some farming areas there, it's a smaller town. They have a school. Do they have skyscrapers? Probably not. Do they have cars? Yep, they have cars. They have cars to come into Sioux Falls or to whatever other city they want to go to or whatever place they want to go to nearby. And do they have people? The other thing says rural areas do not have people. But they do have people. We know that we have a couple students who live around the area, live in rural areas. And so we're not going to choose that one. We'll choose.
Rural areas do not have skyscrapers.
And we are correct. There is a lot of space for those areas to spread out, so they don't really have as much of a need for skyscrapers. We are going to now put these in order from most crowded to least crowded. So we know that rural is not very crowded. So we can immediately X out B. We also know that suburban is fairly crowded, but not the most. So I'm going to rule out A and B, and we're going to look at C.
Urban, suburban, rural.
And D.
Urban, rural, suburban.
So the first one is uncommon. That is both urban. But the second one is suburban and one is rural. And the third one is either rural or suburban. So if we look at C, we will see that it goes urban, which is a city, a big city, suburban, which is more like Sioux Falls, and then it would be rural, which is like a city like Del Rapids or Salem or Crooks or something like that. So that would be Minneapolis or Los Angeles. And then maybe a city like Sioux Falls, which is a little bit smaller, and then it's even smaller yet. So C looks pretty good. It goes from big to small. We go to D, urban, like Los Angeles, and then rural, like Del Rapids or Salem, and then suburban, like Sioux Falls. So that one goes big to small to medium. And C goes big to medium, small. And we wanted to do the order from the most crowded to the least crowded. There's a lot of people in urban. And when I did this with my hands, I should have explained I was talking about population. So urban, suburban, rural. Let's choose C.
Urban, suburban, rural.
We got it right. Nice job. We got 5 out of 5. That is great for our quiz. Where would you like to live? If you were going to move anywhere in the world, and I'm going to put this on a Facebook poll talking about communities, what would be your choice? Would you want to live in an urban area? Would you want to live in a suburban area and stay like where you are? Moby's really dancing away. I like it. Or would you like to live in a small area with a lot of space, not many people, like a farming area, away from the city and away from buildings and a big population? So I want to hear what you have to say and what you think about this. So go log in on Facebook and under the Pathways page and make your vote, please.